Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Thanks for tuning in and taking the time to join us today. And we're back for the first episode of 2024. And I'm joined by Amanda, Commercial Director at Blend, to discuss the ROI revolution and why revenue trumps leads every time. And as somebody who's transitioned from measuring leads to revenue, I've seen the benefits of doing this firsthand and the opportunities that it really opens up. It really does shed a new light on marketing and provides a whole new way of working that I find really exciting. And I think everybody who's done this finds really exciting too. What were your initial thoughts about this topic, Amanda?
I suppose my initial thoughts are that essentially revenue is the coal face of the business, right? It is really where the action is happening. And the closer that marketers can get to that coal face, the better, especially when it comes to communicating with the members of their team. So if there's only one thing that you need to know kind of about why this is important, it's that it means that you're immediately speaking the same language as the people around you. But there's lots more reasons beside that too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Let's dive in. If you are watching live, feel free to ask questions or, disagree with us, have a discussion with us. I think it was a couple of episodes ago, actually. It got a bit heated in the chat. There were a few comments flying around and it was good. It was good. So yeah, if you do want to pop anything in the comment section on LinkedIn, we can discuss that as we go along. Cool. Okay, let's get into this. So we have spoken about this before, not really on its own episode, but we've spoken about the problem with measuring leads before in dribs and drabs here and there. And we should still go through that. But I'd love to frame this and look at this in a different way and get your thoughts on what is the opportunity here for marketers when we talk about going from measuring leads to measuring revenue.
I think probably the first thing to think about when it comes to the opportunity is to get back to the realities of the definition, right? A lead should be someone who's genuinely interested in your business, but the way it's used in many, many cases is actually to refer to anyone whose details you have, which is contact, not really a lead at all. There's a huge, huge difference between anyone who you happen to have the contact details of and that somewhere line, along the continuum and that is people who actually are asking about what you sell. There's another big line to people who you're really seriously talking to about working with or who are converting. And then there's another line to customer. Leads are so far away from people who might become customers. They're in there potentially, but if your definition of what a lead is and what the other stages are poor, if those definitions are poor, then actually you're really missing the opportunity to measure anything of value. Because if you're measuring everyone and his uncle and everyone who they know on LinkedIn, then you're not actually anywhere closer to identifying the people who actually want to buy from you and the people who can change the real metric, which is revenue. So the opportunity there, I think, is to have a fresh take on how you define the people whose details you have, with a view to closing some of those gaps and actually having lead mean something, because it doesn't for so many organizations at the moment, because it needs to ultimately be aligned to the real picture that the business is focusing on, which is that revenue, it's that bottom line.
Yeah.
I think the it's about opportunity. It's also about risk and avoiding risk. And I think the biggest risk that organizations and marketers have at the moment is we're in very volatile, changing times. What a deal is worth to you today may not be the same tomorrow. It may not be the same in 6 months' time. Whether you're in a highly kind of informed and hard worked for sale environment where you're expecting to get a lot of business and a lot of revenue out of a customer, or you're somewhere more transactional. If you're in a transactional environment, your prices could be being pushed by your competitors. You could be seeing intense commoditization. At the other end of things, budgets are being squeezed, and maybe the people who you were talking to 6 months ago don't have the same amount of money to spend on what you do that they did. And you need to be able to respond to that. If leads are the thing that you're measuring, then you could get the lead target.
Yeah.
At marketing or sales level, even, like, you could hit the number of leads that you want to talk to, the number of contacts, etc., and still miss the revenue target. So really, the number of leads is a vanity metric. What you're looking for is how it influences that final one. So keeping your eye on revenue is essential. It's far too risky not to, I think.
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. I'm not sure where the idea started that more leads equals more customers and revenue, because it's really not true. And I think if 99% of businesses looked at that data and the conversion between lead and customer, they would see just that. And the opportunity really is opening your eyes to that and seeing the reality that's there in front of you, and starting to use what you have in marketing, the time, resource, budget, in a different, more effective way than just generating these leads that ultimately go nowhere. Because I bet, in most cases, marketing budget is largely spent on generating these low quality leads that never turn into customers. And the people that actually do turn into customers and revenue are part of that group somewhere, or that channel that you have minimal investment in.
Mhm. I think that's really true. I think it's quite common to talk to organizations. Many organizations do not have a limitless supply of people who would ever buy what they do. Many of them, particularly in the B2B world, but also in B2C situations, know exactly the numbers of people in the world, in their country and territory, that could or would buy what they have on offer. Right?
Yeah,
There's data that backs them up, or they can just look around the market and see who might be the right kind of fit for them. And yet they pursue vast databases of leads, vast numbers of people who therefore cannot be those relevant individuals, cannot be the ones who can actually buy. So much effort is put into maintaining email subscribers, or reaching more and more people, when actually better quality efforts to the people who really count would make a bigger difference.
yeah, absolutely. And these are patterns that we've seen time and time again. The patterns are out there. The data is out there available for companies that have published it and seen these things. We've seen this for customers in previous businesses, for ourselves even, which has led to shifts like this. So yeah, it's clear for all to see that leads really need to take a back seat now in marketing, and everyone kind of needs to open their eyes to revenue. And it really goes hand in hand with buyer behavior. Like, fundamentally, measuring leads drives the wrong behavior in marketing as well. It doesn't align with what buyers want. It works against them, not with them. Like, buyers don't want to do the things that you're trying to get them to do to capture their contact details. They want to remain entirely anonymous until they want to talk to you, which really just goes against everything that you're trying to do in capturing and generating a lead, which is essentially contact details. So really shifting that mentality allows you to work better with buyers too.
I think there are two areas to think about when it comes to the kinds of, not negative behavior, but poor choices that marketers make when they focus on leads. One is absolutely your point, that like it will lead you it leads to identification of loopholes. You know, we've got legislation tightening up on what you can do with people's data, how you can acquire it, but people are still being spammed every single day. So people are buying data, you know, finding ways to buy data, scrape data, get hold of your information, exploit loopholes to get through to you, because a lead is a lead in their mind. So that's one kind of bad behavior, and really properly, you know, very, very questionable ethically. And I think the other side of it is that essentially the focus on leads leads us to game the system in other ways. SEO is such an important and powerful tool for most organizations, but many brands are still afraid of owning niche terms and look constantly for bigger volumes. We used to talk about the power of the long tail keyword and all of that kind of stuff. The power of the niche is that it's specific. It's actually relevant to what you do.
Yeah.
But people are driven to answer questions that are better answered by, you know, online encyclopedias or, you know, third-party data sets and things like that. You're all writing articles that are like, what is this? What makes up this kind of thing? Because you want to hit those bigger volume keywords. Actually, those aren't the keywords that are going to influence your revenue. The keywords that are going to influence the revenue are the ones that have tens of 30, you know, 30, 50 volume, but are really specific to what you do, if that's the space that you're in. And even if you're in a space where you're talking about that in the thousands, better off going for 1,000 volume, but it's very specific to what you buy, and supporting it with terms that are relevant but still more niche than the biggest terms that are out there with 100,000 searches every single month. So I think it leads to, on the one hand, questionable ethics, and on the other, effort and expense that isn't going to move the needle.
Yeah, that's a great example actually, because the whole idea of lead generation kind of used to or still does go hand in hand with SEO. The thinking that if I try and write a piece on my website that targets this incredibly high volume keyword, let's say project management, for example, then I create a guide on that huge topic. Somebody downloads it, boom, we have a lead, but they're not really interested in your, let's say, project management tool for manufacturing engineers or something. That's what your tool does. It's not a
No,
project management thing, full
people
stop,
like
if
that.
you know what I mean.
Exactly. We're all out there thinking about, should I block personal email addresses from my site? Should I block, you know,
Yeah.
what do I do when I see something that's got AC in it or edu or whatever it is? Like students, people who are just browsing for their own information, etc. We end up finding ways to filter them out because they're not relevant, right? But yet we went to the effort of acquiring their attention
Yeah.
in order to tell Google that something else we were doing is important as well.
Is there ever a situation now, do you think, where you should be measuring leads?
I'm interested in your take on that.
I think in certain situations, measuring a lead count can make sense, but being measured on a lead count by the entire organization just doesn't really benefit anybody. Like trade show booths, for example, where you scan badges, you might call those leads, and that's an okay thing to look at. It indicates some interest in your offering, like in your appearance at that show, for example. Not necessarily intent to purchase, but like interest in what you were doing and saying there. Email subscribers is another one. It indicates interest in your content and what you're saying, your position in the market, but it doesn't indicate intent to purchase. So there's a big difference there in what a lead is indicating,
Mhm.
because in most cases it's not intent to purchase.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think what I would probably add to that is that where lead is not the only thing you are measuring, it can be a useful point of visibility. If you are also measuring some sort of marketing qualified metric, when we talk about this as blend, outside of the podcast, we very often sort of point to the fact that your marketing qualified lead, the simplest definition is the people who say, hello, I'd like to find out more about your product or service. It's the hand raisers is what we would call them. And I think that, but many organizations have broader definitions where other kinds of behavior can contribute to that marketing qualification. Then you've got some form of sales qualification. Do they have the budget, the authority, the need, and so on? Do they have those bits and pieces that you need to say, yes, there's actually something in this that could turn into a sale ultimately? Obviously, if you're in more transactional spaces, that step's kind of removed. But the point is, there needs to be there's a point in time where someone says, I'd quite like to buy, and then there's a point in time where they actually move on to a purchase process. And really, everything that you're doing should be focused on the point about revenue. But any point in time where you're dividing the number of people in a pool down across that revenue, you're getting some sort of value, be it average value of a customer, average value of your sales qualified lead, average value of a marketing qualified lead, or what percentage of them close, and things like that. If you only focus on the one that has the least, of all of those pools has the least likelihood to turn into conversion, then you're not really measuring enough to understand what to do if you don't get the revenue that you're looking for. So yes, as part of something that's more nuanced. Yes, if you're looking at the different kinds of leads, where they come from, breaking it down in ways that show you these efforts are contributing in this way, this kind of lead is performing better than others, so that you change what you're doing with it. But just focusing on it as an overall bucket and trying to increase it is not valuable at all.
Yeah. And we were chatting before this, and I really liked your point on the race to the cheapest leads. It's what it leads
Yeah,
to when you're
absolutely.
looking at that bucket.
Absolutely. If you're just thinking, I've got to hit 20,000 or I've got to exceed 20,000, then you don't care about quality anymore. It's a race to the bottom. It really
Yeah.
is. Like, how can I get everyone and their auntie and uncle to sign up for this? Or how can I get their data? It's, you're going to be diluting the quality of your efforts ultimately. And therefore you're not going to get quality in the results.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. We have kind of talked about why revenue is the superior metric to measure as we've gone through this, but I think it's worth just diving into it to make things crystal clear. So why is revenue the superior metric that marketers should be measured on and measuring?
There are quite a few reasons for this. I think the simplest reason is that everyone in an organization, whatever their function, should be focusing on aligning their performance in that function to the vision and drive of the business. The vision and drive of the business, underneath all of the mission, vision, value stuff, is going to be acquisition of revenue. It's going to be growth, or maintenance of a revenue level at the very least. It's not going to be let's get worse, is it? So by looking at revenue, you are automatically looking at what the leaders in your business are looking at. You are aligning yourself to their principal goals and what they are fundamentally going after. So in terms of your communication with them from whatever part of the business that you are in, your communication is already going to be aligned to the way that they are talking and the things that they are looking at. What I see a lot of marketers doing, and we've definitely talked about on other episodes, is trying to educate leadership about their world.
Hmm.
Marketing has value if you understand these pieces of jargon. Marketing has value if you understand these things that are going on these different platforms and these trends and so on. But actually, you are the one who should be doing the translation exercise. You are the one who should be saying how what those things do contributes to the thing that they actually are focused on.
Yeah.
Trying to introduce another metric of, you know, what's worse than just trying to track leads? Visitors,
I've got
I'd
one.
say. Oh, go on.
Site health score.
Yes.
That's the devil.
It's certainly a problematic one. But ultimately it is about that point of alignment. If you are already aligned with what the top of the organization is aligned with, you're going to communicate better with them and contribute better to them. So that's great. And you're also, the flip side of that, you are going to have your finger on the real pulse. You're going to know when there are problems. As I said, if at the end of the chain that starts with marketing and its leads, that is the people closing and turning into customers, there are changes happening and you're still only looking at leads. The biggest risk that you have is, let's say your biggest competitor comes along, you're in a transactional market and they discount your prices, which were pretty much equal, by 50%. They've completely underwritten you. So you have to change your pricing to reflect that or demonstrate additional value, but still you're in a difficult situation. It's likely your average customer value goes down. If you're still looking at that number of leads to generate and you're generating the same number of customers, you are in trouble. You're in hot water very, very quickly because you're not aware of the impact that generating the same number of leads is having on your actual outcome. You'll be the last person to know that revenue isn't where it should be. You'll be celebrating your successes from your latest campaign,
Yeah.
only to find out that maybe your job's on the line, frankly. Like it is about bringing yourself closer to the realities of your organization, I think.
Yeah. And the answer to that situation wouldn't be, oh, we need to double our lead count. It would be, how do we all work together to this common goal, which is revenue, right?
How do we improve the quality of what we're getting? And how do we improve the average customer value by releasing new features or changing our positioning or whatever it is? Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember the episode, by the way, that you were talking about in terms of language and jargon, episode 2 of Demand Decoded. Don't remember the title, but yeah, we were talking about communication to the
Communicating with your
C-suite.
C-suite.
Something along those lines. It was a great episode. I think one of the clips is our highest viewed on LinkedIn. So yeah, it was a popular one. The point that I would want to make on why revenue is the superior metric, one of the points comes back to understanding the ROI of marketing investment too. If you are just looking at leads, you really have no idea what return you are getting on that investment. You can take a lead value or something like that, but it's not true. It's not the true figure of the business, which is revenue. So if you're aligning your marketing spend to the return of this many leads, not the return on actual customers and revenue, you're probably just pouring buckets and buckets of money into channels that don't actually produce tangible revenue outcomes for the business. You're just pouring them in and getting contact details out of people that are never going to buy from you.
Absolutely. I think you were talking, when we were talking the other day about this, you were saying we're changing some of our own, for ourselves, our PPC tactics at the moment, because while all the stats in Google Ad Manager look great, they're not necessarily turning into what we need them to.
Yeah, it's so true.
It can just make you blind to realities, right?
Yeah, and without that view on revenue, you don't know that. Like, yeah, we were looking at some of our Google ad campaigns, and on the surface, if you were just looking in platform, you would think, wow, this is the bee's knees. Like, this is fantastic. Let's do more of this. Let's triple down on our ad spend. But the reality is only a small percentage of it was actually converting into pipeline or revenue. So it's readjusting the budget, the split between campaigns within that, to focus on the ones that are actually having a tangible outcome on the business. And if you're not measuring revenue, you don't know that. You're literally marketing blindly, really.
Mm.
Sorry, that's quite passionate.
No, it's good.
What about if somebody's watching or listening to this, or a different piece of content, but somebody's in a situation where they might have been in a business for a long time, they're measuring leads, they're hitting their lead count, or maybe coming close to it, but there's not really many questions being asked around it. They're going about their day, working fine. They're having a nice life. They're generating some leads, don't really know what the revenue is, but maybe interested in this topic potentially. Like, why? Maybe I should be looking at revenue, but what should these people do that might put themselves in a risky situation where all of a sudden they've gone from this comfortable position to just, pottering about, generating some leads, might not turn into revenue, to all of a sudden being scrutinized for the fact that all of their efforts have created no revenue?
Mm. So probably a few things. I think for a marketer as an individual, it's probably two things to think about. One is authority, right? Being able to be true to your word, being able to speak candidly and speak your mind to the people who you need to influence decisions of, and therefore, and being trusted off the back of that. So if you are talking about a metric that means nothing to anybody other than you, then how are you going to build that authority with the people around you? How are you going to be trusted in your organization and someone whose opinion matters when it comes to asking for more budget or any other kind of change? So having something that you deserve respect for because it's honest and authentic is important. And the other piece is, should any marketer ever sit comfortably? Should we not all be ambitious? Should we not be thinking not just about what we're contributing today here to our current organization, but how that is going to grow, how it's going to grow us and our careers? I'd be very worried about any marketer who isn't truly fundamentally at their core like quite an ambitious person looking to do more and change their own future ultimately. And with that, if you want to progress, to head of team role or even just a line management role or further to the board, being willing, being actually enthusiastic about embracing difficult topics, your contribution to revenue is one where you will need to be quite vulnerable. That's important. That's real practical skills beyond what you're actually doing for your targets right now. Shying away from that is not a good idea. So I think if you are personally ambitious, you should be looking at revenue. You should be looking at it to make sure that your role is safe as well. As I said, you don't want to be the last person to know that the business is in trouble, ever. It probably means you're the least important.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was just going to say. If
It's quite brutal, but like it is true. Like if you, yeah,
for sure. Okay, so let's say marketer is now thinking, okay, I want to start reporting on revenue as my measurement of success, or the business is thinking that marketing need to stop looking at these leads, start looking at revenue. I think this is an interesting one because you can't just stop. You can't just say, we're no longer looking at leads as a measurement of success. We're going to start looking at revenue, because all of a sudden you've got red flags popping up here, there, and everywhere. The board are coming to you. You know, leadership is saying, what the hell is going on with your marketing dashboard and results? Like, it's all trending downwards. So it's harder than just saying, stop reporting on leads, start reporting on revenue. There's the shift, like the mindset shift first, isn't there? The conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You do. I mean, ultimately, whatever goals you're tracking should be the goals in your strategy. So even if that means amending your strategy, that's where they should live. That, you know, this is how we're going to measure is part of any strategy. Ultimately, it's deciding what the controls and the measurement are. So if you want revenue to be your metric, you need to know and have that bought into as part of your strategy. You need to then work on making sure that it's actually possible and that you're able to do it with nuance. Because the worst thing that you could do really is set yourself up with a view that you think is the right view of revenue and then start talking about it only to find that you don't actually have the full picture. So again, you know, you're working with incomplete or, you know, inaccessible data. So it's got to be in your strategy. It's got to operationally be possible for you. So you've got to have the access. And then if it's a big shift in your organization, you've got to maintain a couple of sets of metrics for a while to make a handover and to make a transition. If just looking at revenue as its kind of raw figure isn't enough, and it probably won't be, your dashboard will need to use some of those old metrics to be your leading indicators. You know,
Yeah.
oh, marketing qualified leads are up and revenue is up. So where are the marketing qualified leads coming from? They're coming from here. That's what you need to think about. Is you probably are using some metrics that are valuable, but they're not valuable in isolation from revenue. You know, you need to be able to see if there's a shift in the relationship between the two, positive or negative. So so certainly having things set up so you've got the data, and then weaving old and new together or having them side by side so that you can transfer people's knowledge and understanding to the way you talk about things now.
Yeah. And having that understanding across the entire business, in particular with kind of like sales functions, that this is the approach that we're taking now. It's a hard one because there's a bigger strategical shift that goes on here, which is, you know, a pivot to kind of a different marketing model, because all of a sudden you're less focused on this high volume of leads that might fuel your sales team. So there is that strategy shift that needs to be taken into account first. But anyway, you can start measuring this stuff without that and still just have a view of it, which is a great thing to do. One of the most important things and most valuable things that you'll get out of this is being able to kind of do a deep dive analysis of those deals, customers, and understand how they are created. Kind of what you were saying, Amanda, in terms of like, have that overall big number of revenue is probably like, whilst, you know, what you should be working towards actually doesn't really help you in terms of what you should be doing in terms of marketing. Well, if that's growing, that's great, but you need to understand why it's growing and where it's growing and how marketing are contributing to that. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless to look at it from in a marketing lens.
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it is, the point is you need to have ways of filtering that information, of zooming in on it and understanding what is causing it. And some of the other metrics or redefined and modified versions of them are probably the things that will be your proof points towards you know, the things that illustrate why that growth is happening, not just that it has happened.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so when we talk about a revenue target and like making that shift so marketing do have a target, what are your thoughts on marketing having a revenue target and sales having a revenue target? Two separate things, but obviously work together towards the main business revenue goal. Should they be separate, or should marketing and sales have a combined revenue goal?
I think that it really depends on your circumstance. Is probably, I know that's such a fence sitting response, but essentially, if you are in a situation where you have multiple sources of sales within the business, you know, you might have new business, existing business that's also going on, and so on. There's going to need to be some split up of contribution. And obviously no marketing's ever going to happen without sales. So how marketing influences sales performance is important. It should all roll up. But what having more nuanced targets is about is essentially assigning responsibility and providing measurability. So it is about saying, here, this sales team is responsible for driving growth out of the biggest 4 customers we have or could have, let's say. Marketing's responsibility is filling up our bucket with the smaller size of self-serve deals that we also do. That kind of split allows for a more nuanced view of that overall revenue, because if one pot swells and the other shrinks, but the result is the overall target, you lose. If you only report on the overall target, you don't see who's contributing. The people at the top can't make the right decisions about what is and isn't working. They might get the same requests for growth from both teams and not see that actually one team needs investing in more because the opportunity is bigger for them at the moment. So, but that's only in cases where there is that nuance.
Yeah.
If you're in a more transactional space, then really you're all contributing to the same target, but you might have other ways of breaking it down. As I said, it's about assigning who's responsible for driving this proportion of what we sell. What does that proportion represent? And how do we maintain visibility on it as leadership so that we can make the right decisions? You have a right in your team to contribute to what you think that definition or split should be, but just saying, oh, we're all working to the same target, again, it could be a form of blindness of like, our results are bad, but the overall revenue target is good. Well, if your results are bad, your business is still going to be looking and asking questions. So you need to own that and identify what you're going to do about it, don't you?
Yeah. I think there is still a risk, though, whilst it's the same metric, revenue is the same metric that you would be looking at from marketing and sales. The fact there are 2 separate objectives in there could still be risky in my mind. But I'm kind of with you. I'm on the fence. But the question I ask myself is, does this still create the wrong kind of behavior between marketing and sales? Is there still some kind of conflict there? For example, if sales are doing some kind of outbound, which a lot of B2B still contributes a good proportion of revenue in a lot of cases, and they need some templates creating from marketing, it will probably come to marketing, right? Because like they are usually the kind of gatekeepers of that external communication. So they come to marketing and say, can you help us with these templates? Marketing then say no, because those outbound opportunities that you then create don't contribute towards our goal. like they contribute towards you and your goals. So it doesn't help us, it doesn't help my team look good or hit our goal. So why should we help you? There's still that conflict, I think, in some situations.
Yes, I mean, yeah, I get that. I think it's very unlikely that that's the response that sales would get, even if they had separate targets. I
Yeah.
think it's still the case that in most organizations, sales and marketing either have a hierarchy where sales is slightly over marketing, or report into the same person who comes from a sales background. It's more likely that the most senior marketing person will report into, say, the chief commercial officer than the CEO themselves. And even if they do, the CEO is quite a commercially sales oriented person in many cases. So there is always going to be that overall that overall target, that overall responsibility that we're all trying to drive towards. And it's not about creating divisions, it's about providing measurability to your organization. And I think it shouldn't change your behavior negatively in terms of refusing to work with your colleagues, but it should be a means of helping you refine your strategies and the approaches that you're taking. If your target is X and you are responsible for a particular kind of new business or existing business, and you have a target associated with that, it's going to focus your efforts and allow you to say no to certain types of tactic that don't actually contribute. It may mean you don't say no to sales, but that you work to achieve the best version of those templates strategically for both of your targets. They've briefed it like this, but you realize that with some tweaks, it could also do that.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw the question out there. I am with you in most cases. You're not going to get a flat out no. It just doesn't work like that. But it's worth thinking about, I think, in that keeping that relationship positive and working towards the overall goal is important, and not kind of being too selfish. Okay. Should we start to wrap things up here? I feel like we've covered that in quite a lot of detail. If somebody is thinking about measuring revenue, hopefully you've got a lot of the things you need, and the information you need, the kind of ideas to start doing that now. Any kind of closing thoughts before we wrap up, Amanda?
Yeah, I suppose overall, I really hope that there aren't marketers out there sitting going, but I'm happy with my leads and I don't want to embrace, I'm afraid of what I'll find out if I look at revenue. I really hope that you're not in that position. But if you are, see it as an opportunity to be more authentic and to pursue your ambition. Because one other thing I was thinking about on the ambition point is your current organization might be fine with you talking about leads, but as a marketer, chances are you're going to move around. Can you guarantee that everywhere will? Probably not. Because most organizations are moving towards having a better understanding of their contribution, of marketing's contribution to revenue. So get on board for your own sake, as well as the sake of the organization you currently work for, but also embrace the opportunity to actually contribute to your business's guiding light, its North Star.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Let's wrap it up there. And hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded, the first of 2024, and many more to come. Be sure to follow the Blend LinkedIn page for any future events, and watch or listen to all the previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Just search for Demand Decoded. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.